solving multi-step equations. So if you remember from last year, it's like a balance. What you do to one side, you have to do to the other side. So if you add 2 to one side and you make it heavier, then you're going to have to add 2 to the other side because that equal sign says they are equal. So add 5, heavier, got to add 5 to the other side. Take away 2, got to take away 2 from the other side, and so forth, okay? So couple key terms and phrases here that we have at the bottom, or right now we have the variable term. That is the one with the variable. So I wrote some examples there that I want you to copy down. You have the constant term. That's the stuff without the variables. So variable terms are constants. And then you've got to make sure that you always combine your like terms. Like terms are things that have the exact same variables. Okay, so terms are separated by adding or subtracting, and variables are the ones that have the same letters. So if you have 4 x's over here and 2 over here, you combine them and you get 6 x's, okay? So here's our checklist, what you're always going to refer to. And you'll notice I even have another copy of that down here in the corner of the screen so that we can see those steps always. So this is your go-to reference page that you're going to look at. So step 1, you're always going to use the distributive property. Get rid of those parentheses. Step 2, you're going to combine your like terms. Step 3, get your variable terms on one side of the equation, doesn't matter which side, and then your constants on by the number that's in front of the x. Sometimes you might have to multiply. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at some examples. Some of these I'm going to have you do on your own, but some of them we're going to do together. So first one, A, we need to follow those steps. So let me zoom in here for us. So we have 5 equals 5m minus 23 plus 2m. So distributive property, and I'm looking over here. If I'm looking in the bottom corner, that's because I'm looking at my steps, my checklist. Distributive property, do I have any parentheses? No. Combine like terms, yes. I have this 5m and plus 2m that I can combine. So when I combine those, if I have 5 of something and 2 of something else, I get 7m. Everything else is going to stay the exact same. Right? Then we're going to get the variables to one side. My variables are already on the right side, so I'm going to leave them there. But I need to get rid of all those constant terms then. So in order to get rid of this minus 23 that's right over here, I need to go ahead and do the opposite operation or inverse operation of that, and that would be to add 23. So if I go ahead and add 23 to both sides, that's going to cancel out over there on the right side because I have a positive and a negative cancel each other out. So then I'm going to simplify and leave this as 7m on the right side. And then 5 plus 23, you guessed it, 28. Now I have my variables. That last term, that last thing, it says get the variables to one side, everything else the other. So the last part that we really have to do, because checking is optional, is isolate the variable, get it by itself. So how do I get rid of this times 7 that's in front of m? What's the opposite of that? Okay, you guessed it. We need to divide both sides by 7. I just write my division as a fraction bar like that because that is what it means. You don't have to though. You can write the division symbol if you prefer. So now I'm left with m on the right side, and then 28 divided by 7. Well, if you're not sure, get your calculator out, but it turns out to be 4. And there's my final answer, okay? So go ahead and give B a try, okay? Pause the video, try that one out. Okay, when you do that, and you're gonna have to show all of your work, but I'm gonna give you the answer so that you can try to get that. If you can't get it, ask me when we're in face-to-face. But you're gonna get negative 22 thirds. Now, if you prefer to have it as a mixed number, totally fine. You can leave that then as negative 7 and 1/3. Those would be the 2 acceptable answers for that one. Don't put it as a decimal. Fractions are our friends. They're more exact. Okay, then let's go to the second, example 2, part A. Okay, we take a look at this one. Same idea. I need to go through those steps. So distributive property, are there any parentheses to get rid of? Nope. Can I combine any like terms? Yup. I see I have a negative 2y and a plus 5y. So if I have 5 of something and 2 of them are negatives, that cancels those out. You're left with 3 of whatever that is. So it's 3y plus 5, and that's going to be equal to 14. Now I'm going to go ahead. I need to get my constants to one side and variables to the other side. So the 3y this time's on the left side. So I'm going to get rid of that plus 5. So in order to get rid of this plus 5, I just have to do the opposite, which is minus 5 from both sides. Remember, what you do to one side, you got to do to the other side. So now I'm left with 3y is equal to 14 minus 5. That turns out to be 9. But if you're not sure, absolutely get your calculator and do it. Now I'm going to go ahead and divide both sides by 3 to get rid of that multiplication. So y is equal to 3. Easy peasy, right? These are so last year, but that's okay. We're reviewing. So I want you to go ahead and try B. Very similar. C. Let's take a look at this one together. This one, you will notice we have no parentheses, so I can't get rid of that, but I do have this p minus 3p. Notice how I'm highlighting the sign that's right in front of it. That's a minus sign. It's also a negative sign. It has to be able to be thought of both ways. But you also have to remember that with this p not having anything in front of it, it's the same thing as 1p. So if I have 1 of something and I combine it with negative 3 of that same thing, or I take 3 away, ends up being negative 2p. And then that would still be minus 3, and that is all equal to 17. So again, now I have to get my constants on one side and variables on the other side. So my negative 2p is already on the right side. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this negative 3. To do that, I need to do the opposite. So I'm going to add 3 to both sides. When I do that, bye-bye on the right, they disappear. So then it's negative 2p equals 20. And last but not least, I'm going to go ahead and divide both sides by the number that's in front of the variable. And so I end up getting p is equal to negative 10. Okay. Now, that didn't have any of step 1 at all. Now let's talk about step 1, distributive property. That's when you have parentheses. Okay? You go from something like in part A, 5 times 2r minus 3, and you take that 5 that's outside the parentheses, this number right here, and you distribute it into everything that is inside the parentheses. You multiply. So what that looks like then is 5 times 2r, the minus sign I'm going to keep that's in the parentheses, and then 5 times 3. Nice thing about that is we get rid of parentheses, and now we can simplify that even more. 5 times 2r turns out to be 10r, and 5 times 3 turns out to be 15. That's what step 1 is all about. That's what we have to do. So if I take a look at 3a, I've already done the first part, but let's do it again. I'm going to take this 5, and I'm going to distribute it to everything inside the parentheses. So 5 times 2r is 10r, like I said, minus 5 times 3, which is 15. There. Now it's exactly like the ones up above. That's the only difference between this example 3 and example 1 and 2. So to get rid of the minus 5, or 15, because I need all my variables on one side, I'm going to keep them on the left since they're already there, everything else on the other side. So to get rid of that, I'm going to add 15 to both sides. And I would be left with 10r. My 15s are going to disappear because they're the opposites of each other, and that's going to be equal to 30. Divide both sides by 10, and I end up with r is equal to 3. Okay, go ahead and try all the rest of those. Pause the video and try example B, D from example 2 and B from example 3. Okay, answers you should have gotten. For B, you should get B is equal to 7. If you didn't get that, try again or ask me when I see you next time. For D, you should get negative 3 is equal to n. Notice how I wrote that. That's the exact same thing as n is equal to negative 3. It doesn't matter if the n's on 0.75. Now notice how I did write a decimal there. That's okay when it's a terminating decimal like we call it. Okay? If it was, and if you wanted to, you could leave it as a fraction. So negative 1 and 0.75 is the same thing as negative 1 and 3/4, which would be the exact same thing as negative 7/4. Any of these are acceptable. But what I was saying is the decimal is okay here because it terminates, it ends. It's an exact answer. But up here, when I was taking a look at B, if you do that on your calculator, you get negative 7.333333333. It's 3 repeating. That's not exact. If you try to use that, it's nearly impossible to be exact. So that's why we like fractions, because they're exact. Okay, then let's take a look at example 4. Go ahead and try these. These are all, try AB and the first C. Okay, try AB and the first C, but then pause that and I'll give you the answers after you try those. Okay, for A, you should get R is equal to 6. For B, you should get C is equal to 2. For C, you should get N is equal to 2. And D, I want to take a look at. Okay, I want to do that one because when you go to distribute, you got to make sure you distribute not only the 4, but the negative. You always distribute the sign with it. You should have done that also in C, for example, but when you multiply anything by a positive 5, it's not going to change it. What ends up happening here is that you get N plus 5N. Sorry, let me just get these notifications out of here. N plus 5N and then minus 5 equals 7. Notice how that times 5 didn't change anything. Okay? It didn't change anything. But in D, it's going to change because you're multiplying by a negative. And when you multiply by a negative, it actually ends up changing the sign. So you get 45 on the left side. The 9 is going to stay put. But when I go to distribute the negative 4, I have negative 4 times 2p. Negative times a positive is a negative. So that would be minus 8p, because remember, negatives and minus are the same thing. But now here, when I take that negative 4 and I multiply it times negative 1 or a minus 1, it's going to end up being minus a negative 4. And when I have these two negative signs right next to each other, it ends up that they cancel each other out and it becomes a plus. So we end up with that equation. Now if I keep going, I'm going to go ahead and combine my like terms. This time I have constants that are like terms. Same thing. So I have 9 plus 4 now. So that would be 13. And I still have this minus 8p. All of that equals 45. So I'm going to go ahead then and I'm going to subtract 13 from both sides because that's the opposite of this plus 13. I need to get that constant to the other side. So over here on the left side, that would give me 32 is equal to negative 8p. The minus sign you got to bring down as a negative. So last but not least, I'm going to divide both sides by negative 8. P is going to be equal to negative 4. So you got to be careful of that negative sign. You've got to make sure that you include that when you're distributing. Now, last but not least, these fractions. Oh, I know you guys don't like fractions. A lot of people don't. That's okay. We got to get rid of them. So what we're going to do, you'll notice I wrote some things on the side there that I want you to also write down. You're going to get common denominators. For B, there already are common denominators, so it's a little bit easy. So let's start with that one. And then what it says right over here, you need to multiply both sides of the equation by that common denominator then. So for B, I'm going to go ahead and multiply the left side by my common denominator, which is 13. And because I did that on the left side, I'm also going to do that exact same thing on the right side. So I'm going to multiply everything by 13. Okay, when I do that, when I take this, because this would be the distributive property then, I got to multiply both terms by 13. When you multiply and divide by the same number, they cancel each other out. So what's going to happen on the left is that we're going to get b minus 3b. And that's going to be equal to 130. That's it. So much easier, right? So you can do that to get rid of the fractions. Now combining my like terms, I would have negative 2b equals 130. And last but not least, divide both sides by negative 2. And I would get b is equal to 130 divided by 2. If you're not sure, get your calculator. But I know that 100 divided by 2 is 50. And then 30 divided by 2 is 15. So 50 plus 15 is 65. But it's also negative because different signs. Now, if we take a look at A, this one's a little bit different because you'll notice I don't have common denominators, unfortunately. So I need to think about if I were going to add 3/4 and 1/3 or subtract them, what would the denominator have to look like? In this case, the common denominator is 12. So this is going to be, don't want the highlighter, something over 12x minus something over 12x, and that's going to be equal to 10. So to decide what the numerator is going to be, you have to ask yourself, what do I need to multiply 4 by to get 12? That's 3, right? So if I don't want to change the fraction at all, I need to do that exact same thing to the numerator. So this becomes 9/12. And if you simplified 9/12, you would get 3/4, and that's good because that's what we had originally. Now for 1/3, to get from 3 to 12, I need to multiply by 4, so I need to do the same thing to the numerator. That becomes 4/12. So now, when I go ahead and multiply the left side by 12 and the right side by 12, the fraction should go bye-bye. Multiplying and dividing by the same number will cancel those denominators out. So I would be left with 9x minus 4x is equal to 120. You know what to do now. Don't have any parentheses. Have like terms, so I'm going to go ahead and combine those and get 5x equals 120. Don't already have my variables on the left side and my constants on the right side, so I'm going to go ahead and isolate x. It's times 5 right now, so the opposite of that would be to divide both sides by 5, and I would get x is equal to 120 divided by 5. Again, if you're not sure, check your calculator, but it ends up being 24. Okay? So make sure you have everything filled out when I see you next, because that is what I'm going to be checking. I'm going to be checking the notes and all of it, even the ones that I did not go through with you. I want you to give them a shot, okay? That's it for now. Good luck, and I will see you soon.